If you look at the Russian-Ukrainian war, and if you were following just the English language media, English language communication channels, which dominate the world's communication channels, you could be forgiven for thinking that the sanctions on Russia are basically a good idea and are essentially working, and most people see it that way. Until you get into the fine print and you realize that of the 54 African countries, the number supporting the sanctions is 0. Of the 32 Latin American countries, the number supporting the sanctions is 0. Of the 22 Middle Eastern countries, the number supporting the sanctions is 0. The 48 Asian countries, number supporting the sanctions are 3. South Korea, Japan, Singapore. 16 Pacific Island countries, 2. Australia and New Zealand. So I just named you 175 countries, 5 of which are supporting the sanctions. So the sanctions are essentially an American, Western European, and a few American allies, essentially in Asia and Australasia. Now, the relevance of that is that it does show you a certain kind of fissure that exists that you don't hear a lot about. And the positive side of which may be, this is the question, may be, that all those other countries over time will say to both the United States and China, as I said earlier, it's just not acceptable for you all not to have a decent relationship. And China, by the way, is already the largest trading partner with 140 of those countries. And China, I was just in China earlier this week, listening to a new sort of, well, a more prominent form of a term of art the Chinese are using called Chinese modernization. And they're determined to illustrate to the world that modernization and westernization are not synonymous, and that modernization can take different forms in different countries. And I was listening to the foreign minister lay all this out, and among the other things he cited was, in no particular order, China's contributed more to global growth in the last decade than all G7 countries put together. 1.4 billion people in China are more than all the developed world put together. They're the leading trader with 140 countries. The trade between China and ASEAN, this is amazing, the trade between China and ASEAN is bigger than the trade between the United States and the EU. So when you start going down through these things, you realize there's a certain reality here that sooner or later the Americans are going to have to accept. And my own opinion is the sooner that gets understood and accepted, the better, and that the relationship has got to get better, because if it doesn't get better, then everything I was saying about 2050, let alone 2070 or 2100, is just going off a cliff. So John Kerry told me that in, I think it was 2013, he was the senior American at one of these international meetings that Obama could not attend for one reason or another. And so he was the person who took the meeting with Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping in that meeting said to John Kerry, by the way, let me tell you about something I'm thinking about. And he laid out the One Belt, One Road. And Kerry said to him, oh, that's very interesting. Why don't we do this together? And Xi Jinping says, that's a great idea. Let's do this together. And Kerry came back to Washington.